being a research psychologist, I got interested in what makes these guys tick. How can you wind up hitting somebody that you loved and married? I mean, it seems paradoxical.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of questions that always grabbed me as a psychologist, the ones that had no immediate answer and seemed really complicated. I started to do research on these guys, and I wound up publishing a lot of this research and compiling it in a book called The Abusive Personality that looked at the whole development of abusiveness across the lifespan. And then later on, we took these psychological principles and applied them to women and found out the same kind of things predicted abusiveness in women as well. That was not popular because the prevailing view at that time was that only men were abusive in intimate relationships.
Right. And when you put together that profile, I believe the book was called the Abuser or the Abusive
The abusive
Personality,
personality,
as you
yeah.
mentioned. Has anything, because things in psychology and science have definitely changed in the last 20, 25 years. Have you updated your thinking on that personality, and what things have been added in the last 25 years since that book came out?
Well, first of all, other people have replicated the data. I mean, there have been people in Arizona and Denise Hines, one of my colleagues, who's at George Mason University in Virginia, has also looked at the centerpiece of abusiveness, which is something called borderline personality disorder. That's a kind of a disorder where a person doesn't have a very strong sense of who they are. They have problems regulating emotion. They have a very blaming sort of cognitive set in terms of how they think about things, and that they're not comfortable in intimate relationships at all. They try to make do, but they don't do very well. Um, so other people have done it, and I think it's held up pretty well in terms of being a predictor of abusiveness, and its essence is something called attachment, and attachment is probably the most powerful motive, psychological motive that people have. It was something that was first described by a psychiatrist in England by the name of John Bowlby.
Hmm.
He was observing children during the Blitz of London who were separated from their parents and how they reacted to separation and how they reacted to being reconnected with the parent. And start talking about attachment and the survival value of attachment, because when we're very young, we have to we need someone else to keep us alive, our mother, our father, or both, keep us
Right.
alive. So there's a very strong survival value in attachment, and it's a powerful motive, way stronger, I would say, than the sexual motives that we ascribe to Freud. Fraud, I call them. That was a Freudian slip. I'm not a big fan of Freud because if you look at some of the studies that have been done on his work, you find out that he wound up faking his data a lot of the
Right.
time. He also wrote this whole sort of theory of psychosexual development in Victorian Austria and Germany, where, of course, things were so sexually uptight that they even put around the legs of furniture, they put drapes so you didn't see the leg of the furniture. That's how bad it was.
No.
No, it's just unbelievable. So, of course, Freud was all about sex. And yeah, sex is important, but survival, uh, far more important. Just ask somebody who's got a gun pointed at their head, how important sex is at that point. Um, so, borderline personality has an attachment origin, and that's why you have these guys who are so protective of the social distance and emotional distance between themselves and their wives. They become controlling because they want to keep her at a certain distance. They don't want to let go, but they mask that dependency. And so it comes out as a kind of controlling thing. It's got a very psychological origin. It's not the way that gender feminists talk about it as just men thinking of women as property. I mean, men don't really think of women as property. That's ridiculous. It's just one of these really superficial political points of view.
Hmm. And so how would you categorize the abusive personality now if you had to put it point by point? What does that look like?
Well, it's first of all, it's a person who's got disproportionate emotional reactions to intimate events. Tends to really um, how can I put it, sort of internalize or personalize all sort of comments. Everything's an ego issue with them. They have trouble regulating emotions, so their emotions are frequently out of whack with whatever the issue was that came up that generated the emotion. They tend to think of their partner in very blaming terms. It's all his or her fault for everything. Everything that's wrong in the relationship is the other person's fault. They've got no self awareness about this whatsoever. And I mean, that's it. It's this unstable kind of person. I mean, if you look at their sort of histories, you often find they've got a long history of intimate relationships that didn't last, and the one common factor in all these relationships was them. And they're like a boat on a stormy sea that doesn't have a lot of ballast under the waterline, is how I like to put it. They get tossed about easily. And so that's the sort of psychological essence of abusiveness. And, Denise Hines tested this across a number of different countries, had people fill out a borderline personality scale, and then looked at reports of abusiveness. I think they were self-reports that she looked at, and found that the two were highly related cross-culturally across a number of different countries. So it wasn't just my work, and there's been work done in other batterer populations where they found also that the worst offenders were people who scored high in borderline personality. So it shows up, and that would be the sort of general profile of the personality.